Imagine waking up to find your own blood has sold you for a debt that wasn't yours. No warning, no goodbye. Just a signature on a piece of paper handed to a worst enemy. They thought Rowan was the runt, the spare part of the Bennett family. Her sisters, Lindsay and Jade, traded her life for 3 months of luxury and a seat at the high table. They threw her to the wolves of Silver Creek, expecting her to die in their minds. But they made one fatal mistake. They didn't know whose blood truly runs through her veins, and they certainly didn't know that the man coming to destroy Silver Creek belongs to her. This is the story of how she went from a sold slave to the Alpha Queen. The ink on the contract was still wet when Rowan Bennett walked into the kitchen. The smell of burnt coffee and stale cigarettes hung heavy in the air, the scent of desperation that had plagued the Bennett house since their parents died in that accident on I-93 years ago. Rowan, 21, and the youngest of 3, wiped her grease-stained hands on her jeans. She'd spent the morning fixing the radiator in the basement because a plumber was a luxury they couldn't afford. Or so she thought. "Did we get the loan?" Rowan asked, pushing a stray lock of brown hair behind her ear. She looked at her sisters. Lindsay, the eldest at 26, sat at the head of the scarred oak table. She was beautiful in a sharp, dangerous way, like cut glass. Jade, the middle sister, stood by the window, smoking a thin menthol, refusing to meet Rowan's eyes. "Not exactly alone," Lindsay said, her voice eerily calm. She tapped a fingernail against the document on the table. It wasn't a bank form. It was thick, cream-coloured parchment with a wax seal stamped in crimson, the crest of a wolf with a dagger in its jaws. Rowan froze. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Lindsay, that's the Silver Creek crest. That's Garrick Sterling's seal. Why is that in our kitchen?" Garrick Sterling, the alpha of the rival pack across the river, a man known for running illegal fighting rings and mining operations that breached the Treaty of 1999. He was a monster who treated wolves less like shifters and more like livestock. "We have debts, Rowan," Jade said from the window, her voice trembling slightly. "Dad's gambling debts. They found us. Sterling was going to take the house. He was going to take everything. So you made a deal?" Rowan stepped closer, her heart hammering against her ribs. "What did you give him? The land? The heirloom jewelry?" Lindsay looked up. Her eyes were dry, cold, and utterly void of empathy. "We didn't have land to give, Ro, and the jewelry was pawned months ago to pay for Jade's reckless driving lawsuit." "Then what?" Rowan demanded. Lindsay slid the paper across the table. Rowan looked down. The legalese was dense, but 3 words jumped out at her, typed in bold courier font. Transfer of custody. 1 unmated female. Rowan Marie Bennett. The world tilted. Rowan grabbed the edge of the table to keep from collapsing. You sold me." "It's a transfer of allegiance," Lindsay corrected sharply, standing up. "Sterling needs domestic staff for the manor. You're good at cleaning. You're good at fixing things. It's a 5-year contract. In exchange, he wipes the debt and gives us a stipend. We can finally live, Rowan. We can be someone in this pack again." "I'm your sister!" Rowan screamed, the betrayal cutting deeper than any blade. "You sold me to Sterling? He kills Omegas for sport. You didn't sell me to work. You sold me to die." "Stop being dramatic," Jade snapped, turning around. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her jaw was set. "It's done. His enforcers are already in the driveway." Rowan scrambled backward, her survival instincts, the wolf she could barely shift into, screaming, "Run!" She lunged for the back door, but the lock clicked from the outside. The heavy oak door shattered inward. 2 men stepped in. They were massive, wearing leather jackets embroidered with the Silver Creek dagger. They smelled of musk, dirt, and old blood. "Package secured?" the taller one grunted, looking at Lindsay. Lindsay nodded, avoiding looking at Rowan now. "Take her. The deal is signed." "No, Lindsay, please," Rowan begged, as the first enforcer grabbed her arm. His grip was like a vice, bruising her skin instantly. "Jade, help me!" Jade turned back to the window, blowing smoke against the glass, drowning out the sound of her sister's screaming. Rowan fought, She kicked the tall man in the shin, hearing a satisfying crack, but the second one backhanded her. The force sent her crashing into the kitchen island. Taste of copper filled her mouth. "Feisty," the man laughed, wiping blood from his knuckles. "Garrick likes them with a bit of fight. Makes breaking them more fun." As they dragged her out of the house she had built, cleaned, and loved, Rowan locked eyes with Lindsay one last time. "I will kill you for this," Rowan whispered, her voice broken, but filled with a sudden, terrifying promise. "I don't know when, and I don't know how, but I will survive this, and I will come back, and I will burn you both to the ground." Lindsay just closed the door. Rowan had not seen the inside of a manor. She had not been asked to clean dishes or scrub floors. Lindsay had been lied to, or perhaps Lindsay just didn't care to read the fine print. Rowan was in the mines. Silver Creek's wealth didn't come from stocks or bonds. It came from an illegal silver nitrate deposit deep within the gorge, a substance toxic to wolves if handled without protection, and Garrick Sterling didn't believe in spending money on protection for his acquisitions. Rowan coughed, the sound rattling deep in her chest. She wiped sweat and grime from her forehead with a bandaged hand. She was ankle-deep in grey sludge, holding a pickaxe that felt heavier every day. "Move it, Bennett!" a guard shouted from the catwalk above, racking a shotgun for effect. "Quota isn't met. You don't eat." Rowan grit her teeth and swung the axe. Clang! Sparks flew. She was one of 30 slaves in this section. Most were debtors, rogues caught crossing borders, or like her, family bargaining chips. They wore ragged grey jumpsuits, their names replaced by numbers. She was 404. "Easy, kid," a voice rasped beside her. Rowan paused. It was an old, heavy-set man named Miller. He had been here for 2 years. Half his face was scarred from a chemical burn. "Pace yourself," Miller whispered, swinging his own axe with a rhythmic, low-energy thud. "You burn out. You drop. You drop. They shoot you and throw you in the ravine." "I need to get out, Miller," Rowan murmured, her voice hoarse. "My sisters. I have to get back." "Vengeance is a heavy stone to carry in a place like this," Miller said. "Focus on survival." Sterling is hosting the Regional Alpha Summit next week. Security will be tight, but distracted. "The summit?" Rowan asked. "Yeah. The big dogs. They're coming to renegotiate the territory lines. Rumor is the Alpha King himself might show up." Rowan scoffed. "The Alpha King is a myth, a bedtime story to keep pups in line. Be good, or Dominic Reed will come and judge your soul." "He's real," Miller said, his eyes darkening, "and he's not someone you want to meet. They say he can command a wolf to stop its own heart with a single word. He's the apex. If he comes here, it's because he smells rot." Rowan swung the axe again, chipping away a large chunk of silver-laced rock. "Let him come. Let him burn it all down." That night, the slaves were herded into the barracks, a damp concrete bunker with metal cots. The smell of unwashed bodies and infection was overpowering. Rowan sat on her bunk, unwrapping the dirty bandages on her hands. Her palms were raw, blistered meat. She closed her eyes and tried to access her wolf. "Are you there?" Nothing. Just a faint whimper in the back of her mind. The silver dust in the air was suppressing their wolves, keeping them weak, unable to shift or heal properly. It was a slow death sentence. Suddenly the heavy iron door of the barracks slammed open. 3 guards walked in, followed by a man wearing a pristine white suit that looked grotesquely out of place in the filth. It was Garrick Sterling. He was handsome in a slimy, polished way. Slicked back blonde hair, cold blue eyes, and a smile that didn't reach them. "Number 404, Sterling called out. Rowan froze. The entire room went silent. "Stand up," Sterling commanded. Rowan stood, her chin lifted despite her fear. She refused to cower. Sterling walked over to her, inspecting her like a prize horse. He reached out with a gloved hand and tilted her chin up. Rowan flinched but held her ground. "Your sister, Lindsay, called me today," Sterling mused. "She was asking for an advance on her stipend. Greedy thing." "She's a parasite," Rowan spat. Sterling laughed. Perhaps, but she mentioned you used to play piano. Is that true? Rowan blinked, confused. What? The summit is in 3 days. My usual entertainment? Expired. You clean up an ice, underneath the filth. You're going to play for the guests. I'd rather rot, Rowan said. Sterling's hand snapped out, gripping her throat. He squeezed, cutting off her air. Rowan clawed at his leather glove, her vision spotting. You will play, Sterling whispered into her ear, or I will bring your sister Jade here and put her in the mines next to you, and she won't last a day. He released her. Rowan collapsed to her knees, gasping for air. Clean her up, Sterling ordered the guards, and put a collar on her. If she tries to run, shock her until she smokes. Rowan felt like a doll. They had scrubbed her raw, covered her bruises with thick makeup, and dressed her in a floor-length gown of emerald silk. It was backless, exposing the scars she'd acquired in the mines, but the stylist had covered those with a sheer shawl. Around her neck was a choker of diamonds and platinum. Hidden inside was a mechanism capable of delivering 50,000 volts. She sat at the grand piano in the corner of the ballroom. The room was dripping with opulence, crystal chandeliers, towers of champagne, and men and women in suits and gowns that cost more than her life. These were the alphas and lunas of the West Coast. She played Chopin, her fingers remembering the movements even if her soul felt dead. She watched the room, analyzing the threats. Garrick Sterling was at the center, holding court, laughing loudly, drinking whiskey. He looked powerful, untouchable. Then the double doors at the far end of the hall opened. The music didn't stop, but the conversation did. A hush swept across the room like a wave. A man walked in. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He wore a black tactical dress shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and covered in faint, white, runic scars. He wore dark trousers and heavy combat boots. He looked like he had just walked off a battlefield, not into a gala. He was tall, taller than Sterling. His hair was black as pitch, slightly messy, but it was his presence that sucked the air out of the room. It was heavy, suffocating, smelling of rain, ozone, and ancient pine. Power. Pure, unadulterated alpha power. Dominic, Sterling said, his voice cracking slightly before he cleared it. He stepped forward, arms wide. King Dominic, we weren't sure you'd grace us with... The man, Dominic Reed, didn't smile. He didn't even look at Sterling. His eyes, the color of molten gold, were scanning the room, hunting. Rowan's fingers faltered on the keys. A wrong note rang out. Clunk. She froze. Dominic's head snapped towards the corner of the room. Across 50 feet of crowded ballroom, his golden eyes locked onto hers. Rowan felt a physical slam in her chest, like a sledgehammer hitting her heart. Her wolf, which had been silent for weeks, suddenly roared to life, clawing at the surface, screaming one word so loud it made Rowan dizzy. Mate! Dominic's pupils blew wide, swallowing the gold. He took a step toward her, his expression shifting from cold indifference to something feral. Sterling noticed the look. He stepped between them, blocking Dominic's view. Ah, the entertainment. Just a stray I picked up. Pay her no mind, Your Majesty. We have business to discuss. Dominic stopped. A low growl vibrated in his chest, audible even over the murmurs of the crowd. He looked at Sterling, and for the first time, Rowan saw true fear in the eyes of the Silver Creek Alpha. Move, Dominic said. The voice was low, but it carried the weight of a mountain. Sir, she's just a... I said... Dominic grabbed Sterling by the throat and tossed him aside as if he were made of straw. Move! The crowd gasped. Sterling crashed into a table of hors d'oeuvres. Dominic didn't look back. He walked straight towards the piano. Rowan couldn't breathe. The shock collar felt tight. She stood up, knocking the piano bench over. She needed to run. This man was dangerous. He was the king, and he was looking at her like he wanted to devour her whole. She backed away until her back hit the wall. Dominic stopped inches from her. Up close, he was overwhelming. The scent of him, rain and pine, was intoxicating, clearing the silver dust from her lungs instantly. He raised a hand. Rowan flinched, expecting a blow. He paused, his eyes narrowing at her reaction. Slowly, gently, he reached out and touched her cheek. His thumb brushed over the heavy makeup, finding the bruise beneath. "Who did this to you?" he asked. His voice was no longer a command. It was a terrifyingly quiet question. Rowan trembled, her eyes darting to Sterling, who was scrambling to his feet, furious. "She belongs to me!" Sterling shouted, signaling his guards. "That is my property." Dominic didn't turn around. He kept his eyes locked on Rowan. "Property." Dominic repeated the word like it tasted of bile. He looked down at the diamond choker. He traced the metal with his finger, sensing the mechanism inside. His eyes flashed with a violence that promised war. "No one," Dominic whispered to Rowan, "owns you." He hooked his fingers under the metal collar. "Wait, it's rigged to—" Rowan started to panic. Snap! With effortless strength, Dominic tore the reinforced steel collar from her neck. Sparks showered down, but he ignored them. He threw the broken device onto the floor and crushed it under his boot. He turned to face the room, placing his body between Rowan and the rest of the world. "Everyone out!" Dominic roared, his alpha command hitting every wolf in the room like a physical blow, except for Sterling. He looked back at Rowan over his shoulder, his eyes softening for a fraction of a second. "Stay behind me, little wolf. It's going to get messy." The silence that followed Dominic Reed's command was heavier than the lead doors of the mines. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the panic broke. Alphas, usually proud and unshakable, scrambled for the exits like frightened children. They knew the scent of a death warrant when they smelled it. In less than 60 seconds, the ballroom was empty of guests. Only 3 groups remained. Dominic, standing like a statue of judgment, Rowan, pressed against the wall behind him, and Garrick Sterling, flanked by 12 of his elite enforcers. "You are making a mistake, Reed," Sterling snarled, wiping blood from his lip. He snapped his fingers, and his guards drew weapons. Silver-tipped spears and high-caliber handguns loaded with hollow-point mercury rounds. "You are on my territory. Treaty law states—" "You violated treaty law the moment you put a collar on my mate," Dominic said. His voice was terrifyingly calm, a low rumble that vibrated in Rowan's chest. He began to unbutton his cuffs, rolling his sleeves up higher. "And you violated the laws of nature when you put her in a mine." Rowan peered around Dominic's broad back. "Dominic," she whispered, her voice rasping. "They have mercury rounds. You can't fight them all." Dominic turned his head slightly, just enough for her to see his profile. His eyes were glowing so bright they illuminated the dark stubble on his jaw. "Close your eyes, Rowan." "What?" "Close your eyes. Count to 20. Do not open them until I say." "Dominic!" "Count." Rowan squeezed her eyes shut. 1, 2, bang. The first gunshot cracked the air, followed immediately by the wet, sickening sound of tearing meat. Rowan flinched but didn't look. She heard a scream, not Dominic's. Then came the sounds of chaos, furniture splintering, bodies hitting the marble floor with the heavy thud of dead weight. The growls were guttural, vibrating with a frequency that shattered the champagne flutes on the nearby tables. 7, 8, she whispered, trembling. She heard Sterling shouting orders. "Shoot him! Aim for the head! Stop him, you useless curs!" Crack, a sound like a tree branch snapping, but much wetter. Then silence from the guards. 15, 16. "Stay back!" Sterling's voice was high-pitched now, stripped of all arrogance. "I have information. The girl, her father. He knew about the rift. You kill me, you lose the map." Rowan's eyes snapped open. The rift? Her father was a failed gambler, a drunk who died crashing his truck. What map? She looked. The ballroom was painted in red. The 12 elite guards were strewn across the room, broken and unmoving. Dominic stood in the center of the carnage. He hadn't even shifted into his wolf form. He had done this with human hands and alpha speed. He was currently holding Garrick Sterling off the ground by his throat. Sterling's legs kicked uselessly in the air. Dominic looked bored. "The rift is a myth, Garrick, and even if it weren't, I wouldn't trade a single hair on her head for a kingdom. She isn't worth it." Sterling choked out, his face turning purple. Her sisters sold her for pennies. Dominic's expression didn't change, but the air pressure in the room dropped. Then I will pay them a visit next. Wait! Rowan stepped forward, the adrenaline overriding her fear. Dominic, don't kill him yet. What did he mean about my father? Dominic glanced at her, his eyes still swirling with gold. It's a lie, Rowan. A desperate man bargaining with currency he doesn't have. But he hurt you, Dominic said, turning back to Sterling. He starved you. He poisoned you. He enslaved you. Dominic leaned in close to Sterling's face. I am the king, Dominic whispered, and I claim my debt. With a sickening crunch, Dominic twisted his wrist. Sterling's neck snapped. The Alpha of Silver Creek went limp, his eyes staring blankly at the crystal chandelier above. Dominic dropped the body like a sack of trash. He stood there for a moment, chest heaving slightly, the only sign of exertion. He took a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped a speck of blood from his hand. Then he turned to Rowan. The monster vanished. The king remained. He walked over to her, stepping over the debris. Rowan backed up until she hit the piano again. She was terrified. She had just watched him slaughter 13 men in 20 seconds. Dominic stopped 3 feet away. He knelt on one knee, a gesture of submission that made Rowan gasp. He lowered his head, exposing his neck to her. I frightened you, he said softly. I am sorry. You killed them all, she stammered. I eliminated the threat, he corrected, looking up. The gold in his eyes was receding, replaced by a deep, warm hazel. I can smell the silver sickness on you, Rowan. Your lungs are struggling. Your skin is burning. We need to leave. Now! He extended a hand. Rowan looked at the hand. It was large, calloused, and capable of snapping necks, but it was also steady. She thought of her sisters, Lindsay's cold signature. Jade's turned back. She thought of the mines. She reached out and placed her scarred, trembling hand in his. Take me away, she whispered. Dominic stood and pulled her into his arms, lifting her effortlessly as if she weighed nothing. I'm taking you home. The interior of the armored SUV was quieter than a tomb. It smelled of rich leather and sanitized medical supplies. Rowan sat in the back, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, an IV drip attached to her arm. Dominic sat opposite her. He hadn't taken his eyes off her since they left the manor. He was typing furiously on a tablet with one hand, while his other hand rested protectively on her knee. The jet is prepped at Boeing Field, Dominic said to the driver, a massive man named Cale. Have Dr. Thorne ready with the dialysis unit. Her blood toxicity levels are critical. Understood, Alpha, Cale grunted. Rowan stared out the tinted window at the passing city lights of Seattle. It felt surreal. An hour ago, she was a slave. Now she was sitting in $1 million vehicle with the most powerful wolf in the hemisphere. Why? She asked, her voice weak. Dominic stopped typing. He set the tablet down. Why what? Why me? Rowan looked at him. I'm a defect. My wolf is weak. She barely speaks. I come from a family of traitors and failures. Why would the moon goddess pair the Alpha King with me? Dominic leaned forward. The space between them crackled with electricity. Do not insult my queen, he said, his voice hard but not angry. I'm not a queen, Rowan laughed bitterly, followed by a cough that tasted like metal. I'm a janitor, a miner, a bargaining chip. You are my fated mate, Dominic said, his intensity unwavering, which makes you the most important creature on this earth to me. The strength of your wolf doesn't matter. The content of your blood does. He reached out and gently touched the bandage on her arm, where the IV was inserted. When I walked into that room, Dominic continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, I didn't feel power. I didn't feel politics. I felt silence. For the first time in 10 years, the noise in my head stopped. I felt peace. That is what you are, Rowan. You are my peace. Rowan felt a tear slip down her cheek. She hastily wiped it away. My sisters, they didn't know. Ignorance is not a defense for treason, Dominic said darkly. They sold their own blood to a rival pack. That is a capital offence in the High Court. Rowan stiffened. You're going to kill them? I'm going to do whatever you ask me to do, Dominic said. If you want them dead, they die tonight. If you want them exiled, they run. If you want them to rot in a cell, I have plenty of those. Rowan looked at her hands, the scars from the pickaxe, the burns from the chemicals. She remembered Lindsay's face when she signed the paper. I don't want them dead, Rowan said slowly. That's too easy. Dominic raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Go on. I want them to see me, Rowan said, her voice gaining strength. I want them to see what I become. I want to buy the debt they owe. I want to own the house they live in. I want them to know that their lives depend on my mercy, just like mine depended on theirs. A slow, wolfish grin spread across Dominic's face. It made him look devastatingly handsome. A queen's justice. I like it. I'll have my lawyers buy the Bennett estate by morning. The car swerved slightly as they entered the airfield tarmac. We're here, Dominic said. But as Rowan tried to sit up, a wave of dizziness hit her. The world tilted sideways, her vision blurred, grey spots dancing in front of her eyes. Her chest tightened, the silver dust in her lungs reacting to the stress. Rowan? Dominic's voice sounded far away. She slumped forward. Dominic caught her instantly. Cale, get the medic, now! Dominic shouted, his calm facade shattering. I'm tired, Rowan mumbled, her head lolling against Dominic's chest. She could hear his heart hammering, a frantic, terrifying rhythm. Stay with me, Dominic commanded, lifting her up as the car doors flew open. Rowan, look at me. Do not close your eyes. It hurts, she whispered. The silver was in her bloodstream. It felt like her veins were filled with glass. Dominic was running now, carrying her towards the waiting jet. Aris, get the nebulizer. She's going into septic shock. The last thing Rowan felt was the cold night air, followed by the desperate warmth of Dominic's lips pressing against her forehead, and a whispered plea that sounded more like a prayer. Please, don't let me find you just to lose you. Then the darkness took her. The room smelled of lavender and ozone. It was a stark contrast to the sulphur and rot of the Silver Creek mines. Rowan floated in a darkness that felt warm, like being suspended in a summer lake. Occasionally she heard a voice, deep, rumbling, anchoring her to reality. Come back to me, little wolf, she gasped, her eyes flying open. She wasn't in the mines. She was in a bed the size of a small island, covered in sheets of Egyptian cotton. The ceiling above her was vaulted glass, showing a sky heavy with snow. You're awake. Rowan turned her head. Dominic was sitting in a leather armchair beside the bed. He looked exhausted. Dark circles bruised the skin under his eyes, and a shadow of stubble covered his jaw. He was wearing a simple grey t-shirt that stretched across his chest, a stark difference from the tactical gear or suits she had seen him in. How long? Rowan croaked. Her throat felt dry, but not painful. The hacking cough was gone. 14 days, Dominic said, standing up and moving to the bedside instantly. He poured a glass of water and held it to her lips. Drink, slowly. Rowan drank. The water was cool and crisp. The silver, I thought I was dying. Dominic set the glass down, his expression darkening. You were. The nitrate had crystallized in your bloodstream. Conventional medicine couldn't flush it out. Then how am I here? Dominic hesitated. He sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to crowd her, though his eyes traced every inch of her face as if memorizing it. I gave you my blood, he said quietly. Rowan froze. In wolf lore, an alpha's blood was sacred. Sharing it was an act of ultimate bonding, usually reserved for the mating ceremony. It boosted healing, strength, and senses. You bonded with me, Rowan whispered. She looked down at her hands. The scars from the pickaxe were gone. Her skin was smooth, glowing with a faint, healthy luster. She took a deep breath and realized she could smell everything. The snow outside, the leather of the chair, the coffee on the table, and most overwhelmingly, him. Pine, rain, and power. I had no choice, Dominic said, his voice rough. You were slipping away. My blood burned the silver out of your system. It also accelerated the mating bond." He held up his hand. On his ring finger, a tattoo of a thin golden vine had appeared. Rowan looked at her own hand. The same vine was etched around her finger. "We are tethered," Dominic said. "I can feel your emotions. You can feel mine." Rowan closed her eyes and focused. Immediately she felt a wall of sheer, protective terror coming from him. He wasn't the stoic king. He was a man terrified of losing the only thing that mattered. "You saved me," she said softly. "I only did what was necessary," Dominic replied. "But while you slept, I have been busy." He reached for a folder on the nightstand. "The hunt," Dominic said, his eyes turning cold again. "While you were healing, I had my forensic accountants tear apart the Bennett family finances. I also had my enforcers sweep Silver Creek. We found the ledger your sister signed." He opened the folder. It contained photos of the Bennett house, bank statements, and a new property deed. "I own it all, Rowan. The mortgage your father took out? Bought it. The loans Lindsay took out for her car? Bought them. The credit card debt Jade racked up in Vegas? Mine." Rowan sat up, clutching the sheet to her chest. "They don't know?" "No," Dominic smiled, a predatory expression that promised retribution. "They think Sterling is still alive. They think the money is flowing. In fact, Lindsay has been planning a Christmas gala to reintroduce the family to high society. She spent $50,000 last week on catering alone." Rowan felt a flash of anger. $50,000. She had been eating stale bread in a mine while Lindsay ordered catering. "They think I'm dead," Rowan realized. "They haven't asked," Dominic said, the distaste evident in his tone. "Not once. No phone calls to Sterling asking about your welfare. Just calls asking for the monthly stipend." Rowan swung her legs out of bed. Her body felt strong. Stronger than it ever had. The king's blood coursing through her veins had awakened her dormant wolf. She felt lethal. "I want to go home," Rowan said, standing up. She wobbled slightly, and Dominic was there instantly, his hands steadying her waist. "Are you sure?" Dominic asked, looking into her eyes. "I can send a squad to evict them. You never have to see their faces again." Rowan looked at the tattoo on her finger. She looked at the man who had burned the world down to save her. She wasn't the spare part anymore. She was the Alpha Queen. "No," Rowan said, her voice steady. "I want to look them in the eye. I want to see the moment they realize they sold the wrong sister." Dominic grinned, and for the first time it reached his eyes. "Then go get dressed, my queen. The jet is waiting." Lindsay Bennett stood in the center of the living room, adjusting the sequined strap of her red designer gown. The house looked magnificent. She had hired a cleaning crew to scrub away the grime of poverty. The furniture had been replaced with rented velvet sofas. A 12-foot Christmas tree sparkled in the corner. "Jade, stop eating the appetizers," Lindsay snapped. Jade, dressed in silver silk, rolled her eyes and popped another shrimp tart into her mouth. "Relax, Lindsay. We're rich now. Sterling's deposit hit the account this morning." "We need to make a good impression," Lindsay fussed, smoothing her hair. "The pack elders are coming. If we play this right, I could be mated to a beta, maybe even a sub-alpha, by spring." "Do you ever think about her?" Jade asked suddenly, her chewing slowing down. Lindsay froze. "Who?" "Rowan. It's been a month. It's snowing. The mines. They aren't heated." Lindsay waved her hand dismissively, though a flicker of unease crossed her face. "Rowan is tough. She's probably scrubbing floors in Sterling's kitchen, eating better than we did for years. We did her a favor, Jade. She has a purpose now." "Yeah," Jade muttered, reaching for a wine glass. "A purpose." Suddenly the house began to vibrate. It started as a low hum, rattling the expensive crystal glasses on the table. Then the sound of heavy engines roared closer. "Is that the guests?" Jade asked, running to the window. Her face went pale. "Lindsay, come here." Lindsay walked to the window. It wasn't guests. 3 black helicopters were hovering low over the property, their searchlights cutting through the falling snow, illuminating the driveway. On the ground, a convoy of 6 armored SUVs bearing the royal crest of the Alpha King tore through the front gates. The lead SUV rammed the rented security gate, shattering the iron lock. "What is happening?" Lindsay shrieked. "Why is the King's Guard here? Did Sterling get caught?" Jade panicked. "If Sterling is in trouble, we're accomplices." The vehicles screeched to a halt in a semicircle around the front porch. Dozens of enforcers in full tactical gear poured out, weapons drawn. They didn't aim at the house. They formed a protective corridor leading to the central limousine. The front door of the house burst open. Lindsay and Jade stumbled out onto the porch, hands raised, trembling in the freezing wind. "We didn't know!" Lindsay screamed at the soldiers. "We were just paying debts. Don't shoot!" A hush fell over the courtyard. The back door of the limousine opened. A man stepped out. It was Dominic Reed, the Alpha King. He wore a long black wool coat over a tailored suit. His presence alone was enough to force Jade to her knees. The aura of the king pressed down on them, heavy and suffocating. He didn't look at them. He turned back to the car and extended a hand. A woman stepped out. She wore a gown of midnight blue velvet that seemed to absorb the light. A fur stole was draped over her shoulders. Her hair, once mousy and unkempt, tumbled in glossy waves down her back. But it was her face, radiant, healthy, and terrifyingly cold, that stopped Lindsay's heart. "Rowan?" Lindsay whispered. Rowan didn't say a word. She took Dominic's arm, and together they walked up the steps of their childhood home. The enforcers parted like the Red Sea. Rowan stopped 3 steps below her sisters. She looked up at them. She didn't look like the runt anymore. She looked like a goddess of vengeance. You're alive," Jade stammered, tears streaming down her face. "You thought I was dead?" Rowan finished the sentence, her voice clear and melodic. "Or you hoped I was?" "Rowan, please," Lindsay tried to compose herself, forcing a smile. "This is a misunderstanding. We did it for the family. Look at the house. We fixed it up. We can—" "It's not your house," Dominic said. His voice was a thunderclap. He pulled a document from his coat pocket and tossed it onto the wet snow at Lindsay's feet. "I bought the deed at 9 a.m. this morning," Dominic said. "I also bought the debt you sold your sister for. And since Sterling is dead, by my hand, the contract you signed is void." "Sterling is dead?" Lindsay's legs gave out. She collapsed onto the porch. "He died screaming," Rowan said, her eyes devoid of pity. "Just like you intended for me to do." Rowan stepped past them, walking into the house. She looked around at the rented furniture, the extravagant tree, the trays of food. She walked over to the table and picked up a crystal vase, one of their mother's few remaining treasures that Lindsay had kept for herself while selling Rowan. "You sold me for 3 months of comfort," Rowan said, turning back to face them. The wind blew snow into the hallway. "You valued my life at less than a kitchen renovation." "We're sisters," Lindsay sobbed, crawling toward the door. "Rowan, blood is thicker than water, and silver is heavier than both," Rowan snapped. She dropped the vase. It shattered into 1,000 pieces. "Get out," Rowan commanded. "What?" Jade cried. "Where will we go? It's snowing. We have no money." "You have the clothes on your backs," Rowan said, "which is more than you gave me when the enforcers dragged me out." "Rowan, please," Lindsay begged, reaching for Rowan's hem. Dominic stepped between them. A low, menacing growl ripped from his throat, causing Lindsay to recoil in terror. "You do not touch the Queen," Dominic snarled. "Queen—" Lindsay looked from Dominic to Rowan, the realization dawning on her with the weight of a collapsing building. "Fated mates! Get them out of my sight," Rowan said to the guards. "Wait." Rowan paused. She looked at the head of security. "Actually, don't kick them out." Lindsay looked up, hopeful. "Ro?" Rowan smiled, but it was a smile that promised a lifetime of misery. "They like this house so much, they can stay," Rowan said. She looked at her sisters. "You wanted to live here? Fine. But the staff you hired is fired, effective immediately." "I don't understand," Jade said. "This estate is now the safe house for the Omegas and slaves I liberated from Sterling's mines," Rowan announced. 50 wolves are arriving tomorrow. They need beds, food, and care. They need their sheets washed. They need their toilets scrubbed." Rowan leaned down, her face inches from Lindsay's. "You sold me to be a servant. So now, you will serve." She stood up and took Dominic's hand. "You will work off every cent of the debt you owe me. You will cook, clean, and mend the clothes of the people you tried to destroy. And if you try to run, the King's enforcers will hunt you down as rogues." Rowan turned to Dominic. "I'm done here. Let's go home." "As you wish, my love," Dominic said, wrapping his arm around her waist. They walked back to the limousine, leaving Lindsay and Jade shivering on the porch of a mansion that was now their prison, as the sound of their weeping was swallowed by the winter wind. The world was watching. The ancient stone hall of the Obsidian Peak was filled to capacity. Cameras from every allied pack territory, news outlets from the human world, operating under the guise of covering a private royal wedding, and delegates from the 12 major wolf nations had gathered. The air was thick with anticipation, the scent of thousands of wolves mingling with the heavy perfume of winter roses and pine. In the preparation chambers, Rowan stood before a mirror that was 3 centuries old. She did not look like the girl who had fixed radiators in a crumbling house in Seattle. She did not look like Slave 404. She wore white, not the stark, blinding white of new snow, but a soft, pearl cream silk that cascaded down her body like liquid moonlight. The gown was fitted at the waist, flaring out into a train that shimmered with crushed diamonds sewn into the hem. The back was low, plunging to her waist, revealing the faint, silvery scars that still crisscrossed her skin, marks she had refused to have magically erased. "They are my history," she had told Dominic when the royal stylist suggested it. "They are the map of how I found you. They stay. Are you ready?" Rowan turned. Dominic stood in the doorway. He was breathless. He wore the formal regalia of the Alpha King, a black military tunic with gold threading, a heavy velvet cape lined with fur, and the sword of the ancients strapped to his hip. He looked every inch the conqueror, the apex predator. But when his eyes landed on her, the hardness melted away. His gaze was soft, filled with a reverence that made Rowan's knees weak. "I'm terrified," Rowan admitted, her voice trembling slightly as she smoothed the silk of her dress. "A month ago, I was sweeping silver dust. Today, they expect a queen." Dominic walked into the room, the heavy doors clicking shut behind him. He dismissed the stylists with a sharp wave of his hand. When they were alone, he crossed the room in 2 strides and took her hands in his. His grip was warm, grounding her. "They don't expect a queen," Dominic said firmly, bringing her knuckles to his lips. "They expect my mate. They expect the woman who brought the king to his knees. But you are going to give them so much more." He reached toward a velvet box sitting on the vanity table. Inside sat the crown of the silver moon, a delicate weaving lattice of platinum and moonstone that hadn't been worn in 50 years. "My grandmother wore this," Dominic whispered, lifting the crown with careful hands. "She was a warrior. She rebuilt this kingdom after the Great War when the packs were fractured. This crown recognizes strength, Rowan. Not bloodline, not pedigree. Strength." He stepped closer, raising the crown. "You survived the betrayal of your own blood," Dominic said, his voice thick with emotion. "You survived the mines of Silver Creek. You survived the silver sickness. You are the strongest wolf I have ever known." He placed the crown on her head. It was heavy, but it felt right. It felt like it belonged there. Rowan took a deep breath. She felt the bond between them hum, a song of endless support and fierce love. It was a physical tether, assuring her that she would never fight a battle alone again. "Let's go," she said, lifting her chin. The massive oak doors to the great hall groaned open. The roar of the crowd was deafening. Thousands of wolves howled in unison, a sound that vibrated in the marrow of Rowan's bones, a primal greeting to their new matriarch. She walked down the aisle, her hand firmly in Dominic's. She kept her head high, scanning the crowd. She saw faces she recognized. Old Miller, the man who had taught her how to swing the pickaxe without breaking her back, stood in the front row. He was wearing a new suit that didn't quite fit, weeping openly. Beside him were other survivors from Silver Creek, men and women who were now clean, fed, and employed within the royal pack. She didn't see her sisters. They were back in Seattle. At this very moment, while Rowan walked toward a throne, Lindsay was likely scrubbing the industrial stoves of the shelter kitchen, and Jade was washing sheets for 50 recovering slaves. They were learning the humility they had never possessed, serving the very people they had looked down upon. Rowan and Dominic reached the dais. The high priestess, an ancient woman with eyes like clouded glass and skin like parchment, waited for them. The ceremony was short. Ancient vows were spoken in the old tongue. Blood was shed. A single drop from each palm mixed into a golden chalice of wine, binding their lives, their lifespans, and their power together. Then came the moment of recognition. The high priestess turned to the crowd, raising her staff. "I present to you," she announced, her voice amplified by magic to boom across the mountains, "Dominic Reed, the Alpha King, and Rowan Bennett, the Alpha Queen." Dominic turned to her. He didn't kiss her gently. He cupped her face and kissed her with a consuming, possessive passion that made the crowd erupt into cheers. He claimed her before the world, not as a possession, but as his equal, his partner, his soul. As they broke in the kiss, Dominic leaned his forehead against hers, closing his eyes. "Long live the Queen," he whispered, for her ears alone. Rowan looked out at the sea of faces, her people. She saw the hope in their eyes. She saw the future. She felt the weight of the crown, and for the first time it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a promise. "Long live the pack," she replied. And as the winter sun streamed through the stained glass windows, bathing them in kaleidoscopic light, Rowan Bennett finally understood. She hadn't been sold. She had been sent on a journey to find the only place she truly belonged. She wasn't the spare part. She was the heart. And she was finally home. From a pawn in a cruel game to the queen of the most powerful pack on earth, Rowan didn't just survive. She conquered. She turned her scars into armor and her betrayal into a kingdom. Her sisters thought they were selling a slave, but they were crowning a ruler. And in the end, everyone got exactly what they deserved. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, justice, and fated love, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you'll never miss a new story. What did you think of Lindsay and Jade's punishment? Was it too harsh or not harsh enough? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.